Well, good evening, Star Wars fans. Coming to you live with another edition of Holotheatre. No, you can't see us. There you go. Okay, sorry about that. You couldn't see us at first, but I know you could at least hear us. So, coming to you live again with my co-host again, Matt CRG Lutz. Joining
Hello.
us, joining us tonight is another Matt. So this is now the official Matt show. Mr. Matthew Harrison-Trainor coming to us live from New Zealand. So Holotheatre is officially gone global. How you doing today, Matt?
Pretty good.
So
That's
just
a
for
nice sunny day.
that's always
It's also
good.
tomorrow because
Yeah.
you're
It's also
Thursday.
tomorrow.
So
Yeah,
he's
so
in the
it's
future.
Thursday afternoon.
So just for clarification, tonight I'll be referring to Matt CRG as CRG and MHT as or Matt Harrison-Trainor as MHT, just the way so nobody gets confused or anything tonight. Because two Matts is yeah. So so let's talk about some Texas and Mini Worlds action. Both of our two right now we're still in the top 16. We've had a all of our matches with the exception of one being played. We're still waiting on Joe Olsen and Steve Baroni to finish up their match. Joe is currently up, I want to say, by 14 in his match. So as soon as we get the results on those ones, we will see what happens. But yeah, both CRG and MHT, you guys progressed. You guys won your top 16 matches. CRG, you played David Woods. MHT, you knocked off one of the best players out there, the reigning world champ in Bastion Winklehouse. How does it feel to beat Bastion?
I mean, I wasn't particularly happy to see that I'd drawn him. Right, so I'd won my pot and he'd come second.
Right.
Like sort of uncharacteristic for him, and so my reward was getting matched up against him. But I feel like it sort of ended up coming down to matchups in some sense.
Mm-hmm.
That I had a slightly better matchup in the game I won versus the game that he won. Yeah, I don't know. Star Wars happens, right? You play the game.
Yeah.
And I think the first game, the first game I was playing quite well. The second game I was very rusty, but I got sort of lucky that the rustiness wasn't too much.
So what were the matchups then?
So we both played No Idea for Light Side, as everybody's been playing.
Mm-hmm.
And then he played sort of a CCG main deck, so starting like a 3-effect start. I think I Am Your Father, Quad Drive Yards. And then I played Hunt Down as Dark Side, so both playing main decks, which aren't good matchups against No Idea. We both thought that the other person wouldn't play No Idea, so we both took out Imperial Decree. So 2 damage in both games. But I guess the Hunt Down's just like a little bit faster. It forces him to put a guide to cancel Visage out. Right, so it's got a few. I mean, they both play sort of essentially the same guys, right? The same sort of like ECPs and people who had destinies and stuff. But Hunt Down just gets like a little bit of a faster start off.
Mm-hmm. So, what made you decide to go with? Let's go with your first round match. What did you said you played No Idea versus his Dark Side CCT mains in the first game?
Yeah. So I guess basically, when I was playing last, Bastion wasn't playing. So I figured he had no idea what I would play.
And that's fair.
It just sort of seemed like a solid deck. You could just plop a lot of guys down. Sometimes it would just win the game by itself.
So so what made you just the fact that you could go down with a bunch of guys with No Idea, is that what made you decide to play it, or was there something else?
I mean, just sort of. So it's the kind of deck that I used to play. In a lot of sense, it's sort of similar to Watcher Step V, which was a deck from before the reset, in the sense that you have all these scrubs, right? It's basically impossible to hit them with weapons. You stack a bunch of them, you do more damage than the other person. Sort of a lot of moving people around in the move phase. Not a huge amount of battles that you sort of. I enjoyed having battles where you know what's going to happen, right? You know, both sides are going to forfeit a few people. No surprises, really.
Okay. And how did that game progress for you?
So I guess the first game where I was playing No Idea, it was just sort of a standard, you know, you put a bunch of guys to space, you put a bunch of guys to the ground. And then sort of when you play No Idea against Darkside Mains, right, it's always this sort of maneuvering, I guess, where, so, you know, he put guys to the 1-1 site to protect Stardust first. So then I think what I had a very strong space hand. So I went to space first with sort of, I think like Tantive, Bright Hope, I think Luke and Evacuation Control.
Yeah.
Right,
It's
so that's sort of
pretty solid.
I was gonna say,
it's sort of every against a deck that's not a space deck. That's sort of everything you need to at least be protected for a turn.
Right.
Right, and then so I think he had something like Emperor Invader at the 1-1 site. Right, so that's sort of too strong to fight against when you don't need to. So then at that point you go to the outside site, the 2-1, where you can drain for 2. Right, and then you start this thing where you're at this site, he's at this site, so he moves over to your site, then you move over to the other site, and you pick up Stardust, but then he moves back, then you can't move, right? So there's all this maneuvering and stuff.
Right.
one second, everyone. Just want to fix the issue. So with the audio, I noticed that people were saying that there's a little bit of a okay, is the audio working for you guys now? Okay, sorry about that, Matt. I didn't want to interrupt you. Okay, so go ahead, continue with the game, MHG. You know what? Okay. Are you guys still able to hear me? So, are you guys good?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So everybody was saying that there was an echo, and I think I realized what was going on. However, we are good to go. So you were saying about the matchup?
Yeah, so I guess the most interesting moment was there's that first turn where you put your guys down to the ground, and you sort of you're a little vulnerable, right? Because you haven't put that many guys down yet.
Mm-hmm.
And he had sort of the perfect hand, which was a Dr. Evazan, an EPP Maul, and an EPP Dengar. But I managed to scrape through that one and managed to drop and find a keep your eyes open for the next battle.
Mm-hmm.
And then sort of everything once you're at that point where it's stabilized, everything just sort of follows through for the rest of the game.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
And I want to say you ended up winning that game. It was
by 24.
Yeah, I was gonna say. Let me see.
I remember the number. It was north of 20.
Yeah, you ended up winning that game by 24. So you're sitting really good at that point. And so for your next game, you went with Hunt Down. What made you go with Hunt Down over something else?
So I thought he would probably play Legend. And I guess I've heard he's got like a Legend deck that's got a bunch of like blasters that shoot in the control phase.
Mm-hmm.
So I figured, a deck that piled guys at one site, had a lot of weapons. Legend seems to be it's really good in that first battle, but then after that it can be a little fragile, right?
Mm-hmm.
People usually only play sort of 14, 15 guys in it that can actually fight. And so that first battle, right, you got the weapon canceling, you got the subtracting, but then after that, as soon as you start losing guys, you start running out of people.
Yeah.
Something that could just battle over and over seemed like a decent deck to play.
And I've seen that Legend does have some issues with Hunt Down, just because of the fact that with Hunt Down, you can do 3-4 pieces of damage, and that's without having any characters on the board really quick. So I can understand that. And so when he flipped over, or when he put down No Idea, how did you feel?
Well, so remember, I'd also taken out my imperial decree, right?
Right.
So
True.
I think that's the lesson of this. I mean, just put in
Yeah.
decree.
Yeah.
no matter like
starting in
they've never played No Idea before, they still might play it.
right.
So
So when you were on the receiving end of the no idea damage, was it kind of like the inverse of what you had with the first game?
Yeah, and like my opening hand was not exactly the opening hand I would have wanted. I think I was low on Twixes. He canceled Visage right off the bat, and then obviously he's a very good player. So I was sort of like thinking like this is not going well for a long time. And there were maybe 3 turns, I'd won by 24, and there were maybe 3 turns where it's hovering right around 24. There's like 24, 23, 24, right? And he's got Walkling out. Maybe he's got a couple of youth interrupts in hand. Right, and he's got there's the retrieval when he draws, so I was sort of like right on the edge of
right.
Thinking like maybe he's going to pull this off, and but then I think I'd grabbed his Hujix right at the start.
Okay.
And so I managed to put together some guys to do a few overflow and get it down to 19.
Okay.
There you go. So did you draw up from there, or did
we just called it because
called it?
I could have drawn it basically.
Yeah. We had so in the podcast I co-host with Korn or Kendall Holman, we did an episode about grabbers not too long ago. Where we tried to put every grabber on the planet into a hunt down deck. But I always find it interesting when people start grabbing like really strong lost interrupts with the idea maybe it's a protection of having to, make them save 2 force to play their second Hujix, or make sure that Hujix doesn't come out of lost from, solo or get retrieved. So I mean, go ahead.
So you have so many different non-battlegrounds all over the place, and if you grab the Hujix, then you know that he can't just put one guy to all these non-battlegrounds, right? If he does that, then you can basically immediately, at least especially when it's at 24, right? In a normal game, he could take a few overflow at one of the non-battlegrounds.
Right.
But in a game where it's won by 24, he basically can't take any overflow.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay.
So.
And I also knew he had a Leia sitting right, so he'd canceled Visage, so he had the guy sitting there from canceling Visage, right? So I knew there was going to be a target at some point.
Right. Well, that makes sense.
Okay. So you won both your you progressed onto the top 8, and now your prize essentially for making it into the top 8 is you get to play Justin Desai. You go from beating Bastion, a 3-time world champ, to playing against Justin Desai, a 2-time world champ. How do you feel about that matchup?
I mean, it's the same sort of thing where I'm definitely rusty and he's not, so he's going to have the advantage. I mean, at least it probably gets easier from there if I win. So.
The one nice thing is Justin does like to play Legend. I believe he submitted 2 different Legend decks in the pod round. He played Legend in the top 16. Are you thinking he's going to bust out another Legend, or do you think he's going to pull an audible and go with like a No Idea or something else?
I mean, I guess I've learned not to take out my Imperial Decree.
Yeah,
that's staying in from. But I guess when you play these games of guessing, it's just so completely random.
It's stressful.
Yeah, and I sort of just learned at some point you just play some deck you're happy with, and you don't try to guess too hard about what they're going to play.
Okay.
Right.
Right. So. It's the classic scene from The Princess Bride, right? Where
right.
Exactly.
You both know.
Yeah.
I'm trying to guess at what he's going to play. He knows that I'm trying to guess at what he's going to play. Right. Then I know that he's guessing that I'm, and there's just no winning with those things. You just sometimes choose randomly.
Okay.
Right.
So moving on to CRG, you also progressed out of the top 16. You're essentially the number 1 seed at this point in the top 16. You got to play David Woods, who I want to say was also in your bracket, MHT.
Yeah. So I don't think I played him though.
Okay.
No, I don't think you did, because Bastion was in my pod, and so me winning my pod and beating Bastion round 1 sent him to you. for the first round of the bracket.
So I have you to thank for that, right?
You do, yes. I'm sorry.
So let's go over
but-
some of your matches, though. In the first game, you played TTO. Is that correct?
Yeah, we played TTO. David had submitted a legend deck, had submitted a legend deck, or 2 legend decks for pod play, and neither of them had relatively unprotected.
Okay.
I don't think either of them had an escape pod in them. And we looked back at the other major he'd played in was the Online NPC this year, where he played Prophet, and the only TTO protection he had on that was a single escape pod. Of course, he used it to pull Hujix. You can cycle it with 3PO. And so that was kind of an audible of, let's look at this and figure out what we can do. And so kind of the TTO went great. Ended up winning by 11.
Okay.
And I think everything kind of really fell into place because I open-handed, Fet, Slave 1, hit the Endor Shield, pull turn 1, and was able to kind of start draining right away. And then his 2 lists for Legend that he had, one was kind of a heavy space, so Profundity, Falcon, Tantive, Bright Hope, like the things you're concerned about, especially the Falcon versus TTO.
Yeah.
But the list he had played in pod play, we thought was his only ship was a single gold leader and gold 1.
Yeah.
And that's the list he played. And so he put that out once. I had previously drawn into Meanda, Scythe 1, and the gun. And so I was able to barrier the ship, shoot the ship down in move phase. And then he was able to retrieve it back with Rose, and then got Poe back with the Jedi Lev. And so we kind of played the same game again. So, when TTO wins,
you're not a single battle for the entire game?
There was one battle right at the end. Because he had put Poe, he'd activated all his force and put Poe and gold 1 down. And I barriered it again just to get a card out of my hand back in the life force. And then the next turn, I had the option of you do the TTO damage, but then do you drain to again an Endor, or do you just try to blow up the system and kind of cause a whole bunch of overflow? Because I had a command in hand, I could have swapped a high destiny out for a low destiny, and then I ended up I only got like 5 attrition on the whole thing because I drew a pair of 2s after the redraw. Gold leader stopped me from drawing any more. Probably would have been a little less, but there was no force projection, and I think and so he forfeited both the ship and Poe, and probably could have left the ship up there and then got me down to like 9. But when TTO wins, it puts a whole pile of cards on the table. I had all 4 of my 5 ships out because I was worried. Like I was playing paranoid that game. Like, okay, in testing, I had run into, essentially a whole bunch of stuff on the Falcon, and then Holdo and the Profundity show up, and Holdo bomb goes through, and you take 20 attrition, and there goes your space. Like, darn. And so TTO wins by like 10, and that's essentially kind of what happened.
With the fact that Dark Side is worse right now, was that like a factor in why you played TTO? Because if Dark Side's losing in general, then winning by 10 is actually a pretty good result.
Yeah, I picked TTO because I had played No Idea in the second. I had No Idea set for the second game.
Okay.
A very similar list than what I played in pod play. And I wanted to put out a change from my list as kind of the first deck that I played. So maybe kind of causing him to think maybe he didn't pull, maybe he did change his decks for the light side. So and that's the one I had been testing more recently, so it was kind of in my head. and thinking, okay, here's how this match goes. Here's what you look for when you do the reserve verifies. To think of, what's in your reserve, what's in your force pile, what do you need to draw, things along those lines. And also in testing, I had the Death Star got blown up, so I'm really glad the Falcon didn't show up in that game. So, and then the second game, I played No Idea. He had played like a dark deal with a couple Star Destroyers and some aliens and some admirals, and so I was expecting that again, and that did happen. That's kind of what he played, but I think he'd made a couple of changes from his list. Like I don't think there was any undercover spy protection in his first list. I think the only thing he had was Krennic, and so he had stacked up a bunch of guys at the Port Town district, which is a drain 2, and so I dropped Jin there. And then, like, the next turn, he broke her cover with Uda Guda Solo, and I thought, oh my gosh, this is bad. And I didn't have a Hujix in hand at the time. Oof. And, like, I felt like whatever I needed was always in reserve. And so, like, I had to deploy a bunch of, like, I looked at that turn, and my escape pod was in reserve. My Hujix was activated, and I had Rey in hand. And so I dumped Rogue One, Corrin, Tauren, Far, and then Rey on Rogue One at Scarif, and then used Rey's use pull. And in there was the Hujix. I think it was one of the cards that I had used to pay for Rey. So I had to use it for there. Like I wanted, Menace Fades was in there at the time, but I was like all my ships were. It's just weird. Like the when I needed the ships in reserve, they weren't there. When I needed them in the force pile, they weren't there. It was just bad.
Were you?
And then I had. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, were you flipped most of that game? Or
I was flipped. I was flipped then.
Okay.
When I put Rogue One, and I was flipped for the remainder of the game. But it just felt like whatever cards I needed, I didn't get. And I took a chance trying to blow out Thrawn on Chimera with Profundity, Luke, Padme, and Hera. And I had some solid Destinies in reserve, including the Relatively Unprotected. So I was thinking, you draw that one and any others, or like 2 of the 4s in there, and that breaks. That'll break the immunity. That'll get north of Thrawn's 7 forfeit and blow up the ship. I ended up getting 7 total for the Destinies, and he drew an 8, so I had to lose 2 characters. Yeah. And I had earlier raid that turn, so I didn't have any force in my force pile. And then he came down next turn with another Star Destroyer, lateral damage, and I ended up peeling 12 from that. And then just had to consolidate and play for diff, and ended up drawing up when he was at, I think, 8. Okay. And so I was just felt like I was just happy to get through that. David played a great game. The guns worked exactly as they should have. He hit his executor pull. Or he had the they must never again leave the city effect, and so he was set up really quickly. There was a free ride combo in there to cancel occupation. I never saw that. He was running 2 occupations anyways. Yeah. I never saw the escape pod. It was just like I said, he played a great game. I'm glad to get through the match. And now I have to play, I think, Greg Shaw.
Yeah, and Greg is one of your teammates, correct? On the new allies.
Right.
So how are you going to prepare for that with Greg? Are you guys going to work together, say, you know what, we're teammates, whoever wins, and good luck to the next person? Or are you guys going to go off to your own little corners and work on decks separately, essentially?
There will be no kind of collusion coordination going on. There hasn't been a whole lot of chitter chatter about decks and who's going to play what. And so which I think is good because I don't want to know what he's going to play, and I don't want him to know what I'm going to play.
That's fair.
Because you could just decide to both play the same decks and let it come down to.
And I think it's. I was thinking about that today. Is what am I going to do? Greg's a great player.
Mm-hmm.
He helped me a lot with that TTO list. A lot of the stuff in there was. It was cards he had thought about along with some other folks, and so I have no idea, what he's going to play, or I feel like we're back at that Princess Bride kind of scenario.
Yeah.
So, regardless of what he flips over and I flip over, I'm looking forward to the match.
Yeah. And I think you guys playing, I know you will be able to pick the decks, so
right.
You get to pick which side you want to start off with. MHT, unfortunately, Justin's going to get to pick the decks to start off with. So I think both you guys are going to have some good matches. I'm going to be excited to see who comes out with those. I'm going to be doing some commentary, so once we get an idea of when you guys are going to play, because like I said earlier, we still have one more match to go, and we also have Steve Baroni versus Joe Olson to go.
Right. So. I think looking at the forum post about that, it looks like we're still waiting on Mike Kessling and Eric Spixma's deck.
Yes.
Or a match, so that hasn't happened yet.
Yeah, and I think that they are going to be playing all day they're going to be playing both their matches on Saturday.
Right.
I don't know when Steve and Joe are going to be playing. They've been a little cryptic with their scheduling. So, again, I think the best way to do this is just to stay tuned to the forums. Once we get an idea when they do, we'll let everybody know. So, it's going to be a fun match with Joe and Steve. And like I said, so other players who had advanced, Bill Kafer advanced as well. And I want to say, and Brad also advanced over Ed. So, yeah, we're just moving progressive. We're moving a little bit along, and we'll move into the top 8. So it's going to be an exciting top 8, and we'll see how everybody does. So I wanted to just say good luck to both of you guys in your matches.
Thank you.
Yep.
And Bill Kafer is also on your team, right?
Yeah. So we're just we're 3-0 getting out of the first pod play. We're just waiting on Kessling.
Yeah. You know what? I think it's what you guys are the new allies, or as people have said, what Mike Kessling's drinking buddies.
I think that's what Mike posted about.
Yeah. Hey, I mean, if you guys can get 4 people into the top 8, that's pretty good. Unfortunately, you guys at best as a team would have 3 people in the top 4. So.
Right.
But hey.
Would that be a disappointing result to have 3 people in the top 4?
I don't know. CRG, if it's you, Bill, and Kessling, I mean, are you guys going to be sad, or if it's like Greg? Like, are you going to be upset if Greg advances over you? Or
no, I'm just happy to be here.
That's fair.
I mean, I have, I just kind of came back to the game a little under 3 years ago. This is the furthest the highest place I've ever gotten in any tournament, regardless if this is a major, with excellent competition. And I mean, like I said, I'm just happy to be here. Had great matches so far, great opponents, great matchups, and looking forward to playing Greg.
Okay. So MHT, you're coming back to the game relatively. You came back to the game relatively recent as well. This is only the second tournament you've played since including the MPC. What do you think of the game right now?
So I guess I think I have a very different idea of what makes the game good than a lot of people, because I only started playing in sort of 2012. So the virtual cards are already quite far along. So I guess I don't have the same nostalgia that a lot of people do for the times when you had a bunch of Twixes in your deck and you started with one location and you had to draw try to find your Twixes, and there were 3 turns of doing nothing, right? So when I started playing, the game started right at the start. You pulled all your stuff, and so I think one of the things that after the reset happened, I didn't enjoy going back to that sort of not pulling all the cards. And now we sort of, I guess, I think a lot of people would say, the same mistakes have been made, but I would say that, we're back to this point where, it feels more like a chess match in the sense that you have all the same tools every game and you have to figure out how to use them. So I definitely enjoyed that part of the game a lot. Right, that sort of all the decks have these strong game plans. One thing I think that I don't enjoy so much is there's definitely a huge tendency to stack tons of guys at one site. And I think that's just, there's a lot of cards that encourage, right, and putting, 5, 10 guys at one place. Right, so things like ISB encourages this, right, because you get the drain bonus from the one site, and you get to make everyone else's site -1, right? So it discourages the opponent from spreading because they'll have -1 to all the drains. And then you've got just a lot of cards that do extra damage from one site, right? So you've got things like Rose, you've got BB-8. So a deck like Throne Room, right, it's got its drain, but then it's also got the 1 ping damage, and it's got the 1 retrieval. So even if it's got resistance capping it, right, then it still has a drain of 2 plus 1 damage plus 1 retrieval is a total of 4 from one site.
Exactly.
Right, you've got Stardust, right, which no idea is a scrub deck, but it doesn't want to spread really, right? It wants to take Stardust, it wants to take it to the drain of 2, and sort of just sit there, right, doing that 3 or 4 damage from the one site.
Right.
So that's something I think
it's a lot harder to go wide with no idea post errata at a 10-man.
Yeah. And then you've got decks like ISB that are going to drop, a whole bunch of troopers and trooper assault if you do go wide, right? So why would you go wide when you can get the same damage from staying at one place?
Yeah, and that's a good point. Are there any decks or anything that you would want to see make a comeback that you saw when you were playing 6, 7, 8 years ago?
I mean, so I always liked playing ROPS. So my understanding is that was recently very, very good.
Yeah.
And only just got changed.
Yeah, ROPS was it was unbeatable in the hands of a very good player. And it kind of has a very very similar interaction to ISB, where it went to its sites, ignored everything else. It was really hard to punish ROPS for doing that because of the flip sides, Battle Destiny adder, code clearance added forfeit to all the ability 3 Imperials, and then guys just kept coming back with Imperial domination. So they got retrieved and swapped and all that good stuff.
Yeah, plus
I guess the difference is it at least has to go to 3 or 4 bit sites, right? And so it gives you a place to battle it. It might be that it's too strong, but it sort of, I guess, from a philosophically, it's the right kind of deck to have around. I would say it might just be that there's too many good cards that make it too hard to interact with it.
I
but
think,
it at least gives you an opening, I guess.
Right.
And I think ROPS was nerfed, and it's nerfed to a hard position where it is now. But the big thing was that they took off the swapping of a card off the objective, putting on into an effect where you had to start it, made it a lot fairer, essentially. So, yeah, I agree. Like I like ROPS. I mean, it's not my playstyle per se, but I think it's a good deck. I would like to see it come back. I like the idea of having variance in a deck versus just having, as you said you can just stack one site, do 2 damage, pass turn. Like, I don't know. That's not my play style, but everybody has to adapt if they
I guess
win.
I like, it's fun to stack guys sometimes. Like often ROPS would stack people at one site, but then it would eventually spread them out later, right? Sort of, one side makes a stack, then the other side makes a stack, then the side whose stack is doing less damage has to spread everybody out. But that sort of seems to happen less now.
Okay.
And the stacks just sort of stay as stacks.
Yeah. So
I think there's no one card that's making this happen. It's just sort of the combination of a whole bunch of cards that give you a little bit extra damage from without having cards that encourage you to spread out at the same time.
True.
Fair.
So what's your take on GIMP? I know Holotheatre was around for a while. We've progressed from Holotheatre to GIMP. Have you been playing on GIMP a lot, or are you just are you new more? Is this a more recent thing for you that you've?
Yeah, it's sort of more recent. Like I played like a game every 6 months or something before, but not often. It seems like the fact that it enforces the rules seems very good for new players.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. I think it's the sort of thing where like if you've played a lot of Holotable, then it became a lot faster, and it's sort of you know, if you're used to it, it's better. But if you're just getting into things, then GIMP is a lot better.
Right.
So it makes it open to a lot more people.
Okay.
Yeah, and I found that was one thing that was very helpful when I kind of came back to the game, because I only played very little, you know, in the mid '90s. There was always like a confusion of, you know, what are the actual rules? How do we play this game? And I know in some of the interviews that were done for the NPC, you know, there was always a question like, you know, how did you get in this game? What did you think the rules were? And everyone had a story about, you know, something quirky that, you know, doesn't happen now because we've all played it for 20 years, or we play on GIMP, and GIMP enforces the rules. It's kind of it's extremely helpful in that regard.
I think I've definitely seen at least a few rules questions where someone said something like, "Oh, you know, GIMP is doing this rule wrong," and everyone would say like, "Well, like everyone was like, yeah, we think it's doing the rule wrong," but then, you know, the rules people would actually look into it and say like, actually, you know, GIMP is doing it correctly. You know, we've just all been doing it wrong.
Yeah, those are my favorite rule questions. GIMP is doing this. I'm not sure it's correct. Can you fix this? And see, I've never played on Holotable, so I don't even know what the interface looks like. So GIMP is the only thing I know.
I mean, there's certain things that are a lot on Holotable. Like all these sites that let you move for free, right? Like the 1.0 Cloud City site.
Right. Yep.
On GIMP, you have to do something like you have to click the site, then you have to click the character, then you have to click where he's going to.
Right.
And you have to do that for all, you know, 5 guys.
Yeah.
Sitting there.
Right.
On Holotable, you just like control, click, and drag, and then move over.
That makes sense. Yeah, I've had reverts happen in my game, my games involving that, like the Dark Deal deck. I guess it's not even Dark Deal. It's, you know, this deal is getting worse all the time. They have a site similar to that.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. That's one thing that, I mean, it is kind of like, I find it annoying, but you know what? Hey, at least we're playing Star Wars Online. Like, I don't know how many times I've misclicked on like a shield or a character or something and been like, oh crap, is my opponent going to give me the revert? You know, thankfully most people
I think Joe Olsen had a situation in a game.
Oh.
I think Joe Olsen had a situation in a game where he was playing Legend in Texas Mini World. He went to deploy a site with the objective, but it was during his activate phase still, right? So he went and searched through his force file.
Yeah, and I want to say that was also the same. Like, and I understand, like, once you do something like that, you can kind of get upset at yourself. You get on tilt. But I want to say that was his last game against Mike Kessling, and he forgot that was the game where he forgot to put the aim high shield out against ISB. So it does happen. I mean,
it's so easy to do those things when you're clicking on so many things in the game.
Right.
I will say the one sad thing about GIMP for me is I get easily distracted. So if something else is going on, I will forget something. So, and having to go like, as you're just clicking, and you're like, oh crap, I forgot to do this.
Right.
It happens.
It's why I do not have auto pass on active at all. I've never used it.
I didn't know that was a feature.
Definitely is.
Okay. So, got no questions from anybody else for MHT or CRG tonight? If so, if you do get any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. We'll address them as they come up. If not, we can move on to getting some swing and a miss. It's a hit questions. We got a few for tonight. Something really quick and easy. So starting with number 1. Obviously, I mean, we talked about it earlier. No Idea is by far the best light side deck. It Swing and a miss or it's a hit. It's going to receive some sort of errata, especially to the objective, before the end of Texas Mini Worlds.
For the end of Texas Mini Worlds, okay.
Mm-hmm.
So how far out does that push us?
I guess like 6 weeks, maybe.
Yeah, 6. I would say 6 weeks because I think, with the exception of the finals, Robbie is allowing for 2 weeks per.
Okay.
Round.
So 2 weeks for the top 8, 2 weeks for the top 4, 2 weeks for the finals. So it's like mid-October.
Mm-hmm. I would say we're at the end of September, and the reason for end of September is actually I'll announce it right now. The PC this past Monday has announced that Worlds will be online, and we're looking. I believe they are still looking for the weekend of October 21st. I want to say that is.
I think that is different.
Let me double check. But yes, Worlds will be online. They just announced it. They announced it. It's all on the. Oh, okay. So I'm incorrect. Okay, Worlds will be in December online. So yeah, we have
Right.
There is some time. So yeah, we're looking at October before the end of the event.
I'm going to take a miss on that one. I would guess that we'd get some changes, if they're going to make any changes, kind of right after Texas Mini Worlds, but with enough time to have everything released and coded. In time
I bet they have something ready, but they like hold it off for an extra week or two to wait for Texas Mini Worlds to finish.
Right. Otherwise, we'd be playing in kind of a different meta, kind of like what was almost intentionally done, perhaps, with the Outrider Cup earlier this year, where we had round 1 with old meta changes, round 2 after that.
That's a good point.
So,
okay.
Take a miss on that one.
Okay. And Matt, MHG, you said a miss as well.
Yeah, but I guess they have like a change approved by the end of Texas Mini Worlds.
Yeah, and I agree. I think Chris Kelly has said that there's going to be a few changes. We're not going to discuss those on the show this week, but hopefully we will be seeing some changes to the deck soon. I know a lot of people have been anticipating those changes, so we'll see what happens.
Maybe we'll have Chris Kelly on here to talk about them, that he may be able to confirm or deny.
Well, I mean, Chris Kelly was supposed to be on tonight, but he bailed. Thankfully, CRG is a better person and stepped in for Chris Kelly.
I'll happily pinch hit. And I deny that I am better than Mr. Kelly.
Well, this year you are, because you made the top 16. He didn't. Chris Kelly lost to Bill Kafer twice. Just saying. Okay, on to question number 2. So, MHT, you brought back Quiet Mining Colony for the pod round. You ended up going 2-0 with it. So we will slowly see a return of Quiet Mining Colony to play. Sorry, I'm going to say that question again. Losing to Bill in the top 16 has me on tilt, and this is like 2 days later. So, but yeah, okay. So you brought back QMC, played it in the pod round. You went 2-0. It's going to make a return to prominent play in Star Wars CCG.
I think it'll return. Like, I think people will play it, but I don't think they'll play it at the very top level.
Okay.
Right. So I think people who sort of aren't enjoying decks right now will play it and try to make it work. But I'm not sure that we'll see people playing it, for example, in the top 8.
Okay.
I will take a hit on that.
Okay.
Because I think, and I'm not a QMC player, but I think it may be one deck that good players could pick up and kind of adopt for themselves. MHT's played it. Tom Hayes played it plenty. Looking at the kind of objective, maybe you get the system text helps offset like Moff Gideon's deploy modifier to Imperials and ISB, and then you get the flip side of the objective, which says your force drains where you have an alien can't be modified or canceled. Maybe you can set up Menace Fades, which is kind of a popular card all over the place again because of ISB.
True.
And so I think maybe it might be a sleeper deck. I don't know. But
yeah, so it does have trouble with court a lot.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I mean,
but I think it's probably, I haven't played that many games, but I think it might be better against CCT than it is against court.
Interesting. Okay.
So if we see a shift from court to CCT, then maybe QMC becomes better.
Yeah, and the one thing about CCT and court is they're two totally different decks. I think CCT is more of a control deck, where court is the type of deck where it wants to punish you for any of the mistakes you play. So
right.
And
Matt, you brought you brought a CCT deck to Pod Round, right?
It was like an IG88 CCT deck though, so
right.
Different than what everyone else was playing.
Hey, there's nothing wrong with playing. I'm a big fan of CCT. I wish I would have played it against Bill in our Trap 16 match, but hindsight. I think, I think QMC is going to see return. It does do decent against ISB. It does negate the drain modifiers for yourself. I know this, and CRG, you said it perfectly. You can play Menace Fades. It gets around all the drains and stuff. It isn't an easy deck to play, especially for inexperienced people, but when you have players who like MHT and Tom Hayde who love the deck, and they're really good players, I can see people trying it.
Right.
So, I mean, I think it has a good chance of coming back. I mean, Han chewing the Falcon V is a really good card, especially for that deck. You just throw that down, put a couple of other guys on the ship, and it's not easy to get rid of.
Right. It's kind of functionally power equal to the executor.
Mm-hmm.
I agree with you. I think it's a great deck, especially for good players because of all the decisions you have to make with your force pile pulls.
And that for me is I like being able to pull cards from force pile. I mean that's why I like CCT. I like being able to see what activate a bunch, look at my force pile, pick the one card I know is going to help me, and just pass turn. So, okay, moving on. So, we're in a position that TRM has not seen a lot of play. I want to say actually none of the people in the top 16 played TRM. I think maybe there was one or two in the pod rounds. I know Bill played it against Chris Kelly only because he thought Chris Kelly was going to be on Watto. I played it in a match because I didn't know what Ed was playing, so not a lot of the people are playing it. So are we seeing like a downswing of light side mains?
Yes. Go ahead.
I wouldn't be surprised to see more in the next round because people maybe are expecting more no idea.
That's fair. But, I mean, Legend is really popular. No idea is really popular. There are other options.
Right. There's a lot of other options that are much more consistent and reliable. You're not running into the problem of so-called getting TRM'd and, missing all your activation and missing all your pullers, and you're sitting there turn 3 with a pair of docking bays down.
Yeah. Like, I think TRM, I mean, people love it, but it's just not as, it hasn't been winning as many games. Like ISB is decent against it. Court actually, a deck that Throne Room used to just roll over, actually is now a decent match for either side. So CCT is good against Throne Room as well. Agents of the Black Sun, that's a winning game. That can be a winning matchup. So yeah, I think there's a lot of reasons not to play Throne Room at this point.
Well, I think Throne Room's leaning very heavily on R2D2.
Yes.
Right.
So the more people learn how to deal with that, the worse TRM gets.
Very true.
Fair.
Okay. And then our last question of the night. Matt Lutz, Mr. CRG, is the current People's Champion and who will make the top 2 for the Texas Mini Worlds event.
Abstain. I'm
No.
just happy to be here.
No, I want an answer. You cannot abstain.
I abstain.
You know what? I'm going to say this. I know last week I said it was going to be Baroni and Desai. I'm going to go different, and I like our 2 Matts chances.
There we go.
I want to say if we have
You
all
can't just
Matt
say that whoever is currently on the show is the one who's going to
Hey. To be fair, this is my show. I can dictate what I want to say.
It's his rules.
Next week it'll be whichever 2 people you have on the show.
No. Because if I have Chris Kelly on the show, it can't be Chris Kelly. You know what? I'm going to say, okay. MHT, I like your... Okay. You are returning. You said it yourself, you are rusty. However, you have been playing a lot of decks that people don't normally see. You did play Hunt Down. You did play... I mean, yeah, you played No Idea, but everybody plays No Idea. So... And then, like I said earlier, you are playing QMC. I think you're going to be ready for Justin, and I think with this one, I think it's going to be probably the best match of the next round. It's the one I'm right now the most excited to see. CRG, you're playing Greg Shaw. You're in a hot streak. You really are. You probably are currently the hottest player in the game. You beat Bastion. And then you beat David Woods. So I like your chances against Greg. I'm not saying that you're going to lose. I'm not saying that Greg's going to lose. I'm saying it's a coin flip. Bill, I love you, man, but you're playing against Joe Olson or Steve Baroni. I'm going to go with either one of those 2. I mean, hell, in my bracket prediction, I said that I was going to lose to them. So there's that. And then I believe it's... Brad versus Mike Kessling /
Eric Spixma
yeah.
segment.
And I like Mike's chances. Now, I think that Mike's not going to be able to make it out of I don't like Mike's chances for the top 4. So I think the winner is going to be... And this is... I'm going to say, I think the top 2 is going to be the winner between Greg and Matt and Justin. Those are the 2 people I think that are going to make the top 2. Whoever wins... Literally your guys' games.
Well, I appreciate the vote of confidence.
Like I said,
I'll stick to focusing on the match versus Greg. I caught myself the other day thinking about, what do I do when I get if and when I get past David, and I kind of smacked myself. Like, no, we're going to think about the match in front of us, the game in front of us. That's the one that matters.
Mm-hmm. And that's a good call. I like that. I will say this: you both beat Bastion. So that's another thing that I'm saying is a reason as to why you guys are going to make the top 2. If you beat Bastion, you should just... I don't know why. I mean, I don't know how it should happen, but if you beat Bastion, you should easily have a clearer path to the top 2.
I'd support that.
I have no objection.
Okay, that's fair. So that's all we got for Swing and a Miss. It's a hit this week. Moving on, we did have one question for CRG. Were you expecting your No Idea to be good against David Woods's the Steel's Getting Worse deck?
I had hoped it would be because I expected him to put out Mustafar.
Mm-hmm.
And so then if he's got 3 Star Destroyers, then I can go to the 3rd system. I can set up Menace Fades.
Mm-hmm.
I can cancel, the Occupation and cycle that. And so I was hoping just to kind of win a damage race.
Okay.
So I thought, and I had put in a couple of cards to help with it. I had swapped out for Masanya V and Achilles Maneuver.
Okay.
Ritual to kind of help with the guns. until he's maneuver worked in the game. Masanya went lost at some point.
Oof.
But yeah, no, I thought that because there was a multiple systems in play, I thought that would be a good matchup. You know, it's kind of like what happens when you play versus Court. It's really the game changes dramatically if Null Hutta hits the table.
Yeah. Oh yeah, agreed. Okay. So moving on, last week we had a deck building challenge that nobody completed. Nobody was able to convert Darth Vader.
I'm so bummed about that.
I know.
I love the Anakin Skywalker interrupt.
I love the idea. I thought somebody was going to.
Yeah.
I know that I basically told Bastion he's not allowed to do it, but you know what? If Bastion would have done it, I would have given him something extra. I mean, we had, and there was even the incentive. If you did it against Chris Kelly, you would have gotten something awesome. The prize would have been a playmat. I was going to design a playmat for whoever did it. Whoever beat Chris Kelly would have got their own playmat. I will say this: we do have playmats coming in for the top 16 of Texas Mini Worlds. So as soon as I get those, I'll actually display them on the show. So you guys will both be getting top 16 playmats from Texas Mini Worlds.
Well, thank you.
So
Cool. Thanks.
it's so this week's is we're gonna do a little something different with the deck building challenge. This one is going to be a little bit more interesting. And I'm going to make sure that I get this posted onto the forums for everybody who is not watching. But this week's challenge is, I want to see the most power that somebody can do in a battle. So I don't care if you're light side or dark side. I don't care if you win, you lose. It does have to be in an open format or an OCS game. So you can't be just, it has to be in a legitimate league game. You just have to have the most power in a battle. So
This is just your power on your side, or total power between the two?
Your
the two
power,
sides?
your side.
Okay.
So.
And including Battle Destinies, or
Yeah.
before Battle Destiny?
After Battle Destiny, before attrition.
Yeah.
Before attrition goes through.
Right. In the power segment, I think it would be called.
Well, no, because the power segment's before the Destiny segment.
Yes.
Yeah.
I always forget the order of those things. It's weapons and then everything else.
Yeah, because weapons, Destiny is divided into power, Battle Destiny, attrition. So before the attrition, before you sacrifice any cards, all you have to do is just take a screenshot and post it on the forums. And I'll make a little forum post on the general to say this is this week's challenge. Have to have this done by next Wednesday at, say 5, or let's go. Well, the show starts. The show starts at 9:00 Eastern, so 8:30 Eastern on Wednesday. That is the end point.
Sounds fair.
So
everyone everyone get into a game and fight Hoth versus EBO and see what happens.
Yeah, there you go. So that's this week's challenge. It's a lot easier than last week, so hopefully we get some entries, and that way we can show a graphic of like the different powers and everything. Actually, just for my taste, just so I can make the graphic, it's going to be, I have to have it done by 8:00 Eastern Standard Time next Wednesday. Okay. And last thing we got for tonight is, so we're going to do our lore challenge. Or actually, no, Matt, you talked about, so Matt, or MHG, you submitted a card for your card of the week.
Yep.
So,
I can't remember
you submitted
exactly what the name is.
I have
a bad feeling about this.
Yeah.
Which is one of 6 different interrupts that have bad feeling in the name.
It's going to say, which one is this one?
Yes, we should say which one it is. So it's the one that lets you redirect interrupts and effects.
Okay. So what made you choose this one in particular?
So this is a card that when I first played Old Allies, I put maybe 1 or maybe even 2 copies of this in.
Mm-hmm.
But I just noticed anytime people are building a light side deck and they start thinking about putting an altar, they start talking about the cards that they're going to use altar to cancel, and they talk about things like Image of the Dark Lord, or Presence of the Force, or all these cards like that. And then I just always think like, oh, you could just move those, right?
Yeah,
Which is essentially
right.
canceling them.
Yeah.
And then not only can you move those, but you've got all these other things that you can do, right? Like if someone tries to Ellis from one site to another site, you've got so many different things you can do, right? You can say, you're not going over here, you're going over there.
Right.
It stops like lateral damage you can play around with.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So it's actually, if you think of it not as like some kind of trick card that, you're going to try to move your own stuff, but if you just think of it as a card that cancels this weird collection of seemingly unrelated cards,
Mm-hmm.
then it actually is like a pretty decent looking card.
Yeah. It's funny because in the Mike Turner CCT that people are playing a lot right now, one of the cards initially that I talked about was the dark side variant of this to stop projection of Skywalker. So I like the card. It's interesting.
I have never thought about it like that.
I think
You a canceller for things. That's great.
Mm-hmm.
The dark side card surprise gets thought of a lot more because people like to move presence of the force around, right?
Yeah.
Right.
So they tend to, and I think because of that, people think of it as like, I'm going to move my own cards around, right? I'm going to try to build a game plan around using this.
Yeah.
And they don't think as much about just using it as like a reactive card that, just interferes with a whole bunch of other cards.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, definitely. I like how you went kind of old school and obscure with your card. So I like that. Okay. So now for everybody's favorite part of the show, the challenge. Again, this week's challenge, what we're going to do is we're going to go with the lore challenge. So MHT, are you currently watching on Twitch?
No, I'm not.
Okay. So I'm going to just. I was going to say.
Don't open it.
Don't open it.
Don't open it. Oh, because people are going to post their answers on Twitch.
Well, no, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to show the card on Twitch to our viewers, and then I'm going to say what it's a dark side or light side card and what type of a card it is. Then I'm going to read the lore, and you have to tell me what card it is. If you do, you win a prize.
Right.
Okay. So the card is now displayed. It is a dark side weapon. Okay. The lore of the card is massive infantry weapon, powerful enough to damage even starfighters.
That sounds a lot like an E-Web blaster.
Correct.
That was my guess as well. Good job,
Correct.
MHT.
Good job. So yeah, I will be sending you along with your mat. That once we get it, I'll send it to you. But I'll also send you one of the. I don't have them in front of me. The Holotheatre Executor Holo with Jerry on it. So get those out to you as soon as we can. So
Thanks.
Yeah, you are the second person to win the lore challenge. So good job. Okay. So
Quality and quick guess. Good job.
yeah, really straightforward. I liked it. Okay, so
I can't say I've ever played an E-Web blaster.
Well, that's not the point of the challenge.
No, it
I don't
isn't.
think I ever heard either.
No, but you know what? Hey, it is the card that goes underneath Sergeant Narthax.
Yep.
So, okay, everybody. So that's all we got for our show this week. I want to thank our guest, Matt Harrison-Trainor, for coming on. I'm just glad to see you back in the game. I never met you in person, but hey, I've heard a lot of great tales and everything. And I also want to thank Matt Lutz for being my co-host tonight. We'll be back next week. I know Scott Lingrell wants to come on, talk about some of the stuff that the PC is doing. We'll probably talk about more along the lines of worlds and everything. Look out for a survey that Keith is going to be putting out in the near future about the state of the game. So once that is out, please make sure that you submit it. A lot of the stuff the PC does is all based on your answers to these surveys. So if you want your voice heard, that's probably going to be the easiest way for you to get it out there. So again, thank everybody for watching tonight. So stay tuned, and we'll be back next week. Take care, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.